Hi everyone, and welcome to another video. With The Materialist, a new Celine song movie coming out in June, I thought it'll be a good time for us to look back and revisit past lives. I remembered watching the movie and being incredibly moved by it, even as someone who is not necessarily a big fan of romance. But there's just something about this movie that really struck a chord with me. In this video, I want to share why I feel this movie is more than just a romance film. How this film is this exploration of grief that you feel when you get confronted by remnants, reminders, or memories of this life that you never ended up living. It's roundabout, but I assure you it will hopefully make sense as we go through this video. So let's just get started. Spoiler warning for past lives. Part 1. What is Past Lives? Past Lives is a 2023 film written and directed by Celine Song. The premise is, I guess, sort of relatively simple. We mainly follow Nora, whose family moved from South Korea to Canada when she was 12. But before she moved away, she had this connection with this boy named Haesung. And Nora's mother arranged a sort of date between them to make Nora happy before the families move. Obviously, because Nora moved, she never had an opportunity to explore anything with Haesung. But years later, in their young adulthood and adulthood, they found each other again online and they managed to reconnect. A lot of the tension in this movie is about whether or not Nora and Haesung would get back together, especially now that they reconnected. Maybe the old sparks can be rekindled in a way. But an additional tension to this dynamic is the fact that Nora ended up marrying an American named Arthur, whom she met when she went on this writer's retreat. Interestingly, the movie is sort of inspired by Celine Song's life story, which is funny because her husband wrote Challengers. Are they looking for a third? Part 2, The Butterfly Effect. I want to talk about the butterfly effect in relation to this movie. The butterfly effect is this concept or idea where any interactions, however small or incidental, those interactions can change one's life immensely. This interaction can even be the most minute of things. In fact, the name butterfly effect is actually derived from this one time when meteorologist Edward Lorenz changed one tiny variable in a simulation and it affected the whole outcome of a weather model. This tiny variable can be something as trivial as when a butterfly flaps its wings or how many times the butterfly flaps its wings. When I watch Past Lives, I can't help but think about this concept in relation to Nora's life. The smallest decisions that Nora makes, or even the decisions that were made on her behalf, it really impacted the trajectory of her life and also her relationship with Haesung. Like I mentioned before, a date was arranged by Nora's mother for Nora and Haesung, and I can't help but wonder, will they feel, as romantically attached to each other if they did not go on this date? Another example of the butterfly effect that I think is in play in this movie as well is when, after reconnecting with Haesung the first time around, Nora got so distracted by him just like communicating, looking up tickets to go to Seoul, and Nora felt like it deterred from her career trajectory, so she decided to cut off all contact with Haesung in order to focus on developing herself as a writer and to focus also on this writer's retreat that she got selected to participate in. It is during this writer's retreat that Nora ended up meeting and falling in love with Arthur. I can't help but wonder, would Nora even fall in love with Arthur if she still remains in contact with Haesung and still also go to that writer's retreat, if it makes sense? Like, I feel like maybe if she still stays in contact with Haesung, but she went to the writer's retreat, she would not feel anything towards Arthur. There's a lot of what ifs in this film. Part 3, The Story of an Immigrant. A big question in this movie, at least for me, is how different would Nora's life be if she had stayed in South Korea? These are questions that I think about pretty often, especially as an immigrant myself. as someone who moved from my home country to another country to study. But I think this isn't really like an exclusive emotion that you feel when you're like an immigrant or anything like that. I think this is something that people who move in general would feel, because you know how I mentioned that with the butterfly effect, it's like the small things, the small decisions that ended up changing the whole trajectory of your life that you might not realize it at that moment, but it does bring an impact to your life. But when you move, you're clearly diverging from a path, right? The person that you would have been if you had stayed would be different than the person you are after you move. So there's this two clear distinction of the person that you could have been and the person that you are, if that makes sense. I think this move doesn't even have to be something as big as like a cross-country move either. Like even if you just move from like one home to another home, you still would have felt the difference. Like I moved from one house to another house in the same city, but it's like on different sides when I was young. And I definitely could still feel the difference between living in these two different areas. In my opinion, Nora definitely has like two versions of herself, right? The person who ended up moving, that's the person that we see in this movie. But there's also this kind of like hypothetical Nora who stayed in South Korea. Those two versions of Nora is represented through her love interest. In my opinion, the two guys in Nora's love triangle, they are literal manifestations of the road that she had not taken and the road that she did end up taking. Interestingly, I never really felt like Nora wanted to get back with Arthur after she established herself as a writer in New York and after she got married to Arthur. I feel like Nora is pretty secure as a character in that regard. Like whenever she makes a decision, she is content with it, especially when it comes to like her career and becoming a writer. But that doesn't mean that she still cannot grieve over the life that she could have had with Haesung. At the end of the film, Nora parted ways with Haesung, who got into a cab to drive to the airport. And as Nora walked back to the apartment that she shared with Arthur, she started crying and breaking down. In an interview, Celine Song talked about that scene and said, yes, she loves her life in New York and she loves her husband, so she's happy in her life that she's so happy to be returning to it, and she's going to gladly return to it, but not before you've mourned the side that they didn't have. That's what she's crying about. She's crying in the way that she was a little girl. She didn't get to cry then because she never got to say goodbye to the little girl. She's getting to mourn the little girl that she left behind. Part 4. Unresolved decisions and coming to terms with them. As I mentioned before, something that I observed about Nora from this film is that she's pretty self-assured in certain aspects of her life, especially in her career. And also in like choosing Arthur. After she met Arthur and became a writer in New York, she's pretty content with her life. And I never felt like she was gonna run away with Haesung, if that makes sense. Like for example, when they were to meet again as adults, Nora was late to her meeting with Haesung because she was so focused on her work. I think if she liked Haesung as more than a friend, she would have been more excited to meet him and she would have been like not late. And I think that's the thing about Nora, is like whenever she makes decisions for herself to pave her own road, she is content with her decisions. Of course, there are still lingering feelings of sadness, but she never really dealt with those emotions. Nora is flawed in the sense that she is emotionally constipated. She used to cry a lot as a kid, but after she moved and grew up, she never really cried as much. I think she just learns to suppress all of these emotions, and as a result, she never really confronted and grieved with the decisions that were made for her. Like her family's immigration to Canada was very much planned by her parents, and there was nothing she could do because she's their kid. Meanwhile, that first and final date that she had with Haesung, that was planned by her mom, and I feel that resulted in this unresolved tension with Haesung because they sort of entertained the idea of them being together. While Nora followed through with what her parents planned and she managed to pave her own way, I don't think she ever properly processed what those decisions meant for her life. In the same interview I quoted previously, Celine Song said, I think about the trust that you have made in your own life and the decisions you have made. It doesn't mean that I don't grieve. It doesn't mean that I don't say goodbye. It doesn't mean that I ignored what the other thing could have been. And I'm going to have a moment of mourning for that life I have never lived. I get to say goodbye, but I'm going to move forward. I'm going to be very happy living the life that I have now. this is where things get a little bit personal. So I moved to Australia to study because my parents kind of told me to, and because I'm financially dependent on them, I was like, okay, fine, I'll go to Australia because, you know, that's what you guys would pay for me to go. If I had my own choice, I would have gone somewhere else. I don't know where. I was kind of like, oh, maybe I should go to like Singapore or London or America. But I ended up going to Australia. And in hindsight, I do like the life that I ended up having now. But watching this movie made me realize that it's okay for me to grieve the life that I ended up not having. The life that I could have had if maybe I moved to London, or even the life that I could have lived if I had stayed in Indonesia. I can still have all of these complex emotions while still being content with the life that I have right now. But I can still look back and mourn and say goodbye to this life that I never lived. Anyway, I hope this little exploration gave you a different perspective on past lives. I hope I illustrated the point that I wanted to get across. I think with this film, a lot of people kind of dismissed it as a romance film, but I think overall this movie is such a beautiful exploration of grieving a life that you never get to experience, especially because you never really have a chance to do it, but to also come to terms with the life that you have now. I'm keen to watch The Materialist and see if this is like a recurring theme that Celine Song wants to explore in her art. Who knows? With that said, thank you so much for coming on this journey with me. Questions of the week. Did you watch Past Lives and did you like it? Also, will you be watching The Materialist when it comes out? If you like this video, please consider leaving a like, a comment, and maybe even sharing it. Perhaps also subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this video essay. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. Have a good day, everyone.